Good morning. My name is Caroline Allen, and once upon a time, I was the youth minister here at St. John's. My husband, John, and I now live and work in Ecuador, and you, the people of St. John's, send us there. Y'all are part of the work we do in Ecuador financially, and you pray for us every week in the prayers of the people, which really means so much to us. You also come visit us in the summer, which is one of the highlights of our year. It's wonderful to be able to be here today to support the youth mission team as they prepare to work beside us in Quito in July, and the Cuba mission team as they prepare to go serve this week. We're so grateful for you. This is my second visit back home to Tallahassee since we moved to Ecuador. And somehow I have managed to preach on the first Sunday of Lent 2 years in a row now. I thought about reusing the same sermon from last year to see if anyone was paying attention, but a lot has happened in Ecuador in the past year, so I do have something else to share with y'all this morning. You have a whole bulletin insert about the season of Lent and what that means, so I'm not going to stand up here and teach you about that. But one thing I will add is that we always begin Lent hearing about Jesus' temptation in the wilderness. This year we get Matthew's version as opposed to Luke's last year, but it's the same story, 40 days of temptation. The Old Testament reading, however, is different this year than last, and it helped me see the story of Jesus in the wilderness in a new way this time. Last year, we thought together about why Jesus was able to refuse the 3 temptations in the wilderness. Because he was confident in his identity as the Son of God. Today, I'd like to go a little further. What exactly is that identity? In the creation story in Genesis, just before the passage that's this morning's reading, we read that we are humankind, created in the image of God. This is our identity. That phrase sounds great, and we've heard it once or twice before, but what does it actually mean? I learned recently in a podcast that I listened to, the Bema podcast, that one of the Hebrew names for God, El Shaddai, can be translated as the God who knows when to say enough. This is the God we meet in the Bible, right? A God who knows when to stop creating and take a Sabbath. A God who knows how to stop a hand of vengeance. A God who knows when to stop destroying. And even a God who knows when to stop blessing. If saying enough, pausing, ceasing, is one of the qualities at the heart of God's character, then it probably has something to do with what it means to be made in his image. What is it that sets us apart from the rest of creation? In this morning's lesson, we have a talking, reasoning, relating snake. So what's the difference between the woman and the snake, between humankind and animals? An animal, unless very well trained, will not work against their own instincts or desires. When an animal is hungry, it eats. It does not practice self-restraint. Anyone who has a dog at home knows this is true. Why do they eat yarn and squeaky toys and things that make them sick and garbage? They can't help it. They do not know how to say enough. But we can. And we are invited to, because that is what God wanted for Adam and Eve. She was given the chance to demonstrate that her desire was not all-powerful. And so are we. We are invited to know when to stop indulging, destroying, and serving our own self-interest. We are invited to know when to say enough to our desire. Eve, of course, doesn't say enough in this case, and there are many times when we too don't meet this challenge. don't accept this invitation. But there are many times when we do. In the gospel reading, Jesus says enough to the devil 3 times. He is hungry, and he does not change the stones into bread. He does not jump from the roof of the temple to test God. He does not choose to have all the kingdoms of the world by worshiping the devil. He says, enough. Jesus was fully human. He had been fasting for 40 days. The word in the reading is not just hungry, but famished. And still, he thinks, I am the Son of God. I am created in the image of God. I can say enough. Giving up chocolate, let's say, for Lent isn't about losing weight or being healthier or spending less money on snacks. Those are great side effects, sure. But what it's really about is reminding ourselves that we are made in the image of God. Every time you want to reach for those Girl Scout cookies or whatever it is you gave up for Lent, think about that. I am made in the image of God. I can say enough. Personally, I know I'm made in the image of God because I tell my husband enough with the cheesy jokes almost daily. Those of you who know him know that to be true. All jokes aside, one of the most important things we all have to do is to know when to say enough to the voices inside our heads that are telling us we are not enough. We're not smart enough, or committed enough, or good enough, or successful enough, or beautiful enough. If we don't learn to identify those voices as the lies that they are, we find ourselves giving into the temptation like Eve, rather than denying it like Jesus. Because you are made in the image of God, not only can you say enough, you are enough. As John and I work in Ecuador, I say this a lot. It is my hope and my goal and my dream that each person we get to work with will hear and know and deeply feel that they are made in the image of God. It's my hope for you too. Last weekend, I was part of the team that organized a Happening weekend in Ecuador. Happening is a diocesan-wide retreat for young people, and it's offered in the Episcopal Church throughout the world, including here in Florida. The whole goal of the retreat is that each young person who participates will leave the weekend feeling loved, feeling like they are enough. One of the participants last weekend was a girl named Jocelyn, who I have known for years. She goes to the church that's the closest to our house, so that's usually where we end up on Sundays. And her story is a hard one. When she was born, her father rejected her because he wanted a son, and she was female. Her mother was abused, both physically and psychologically, by her father. And eventually they decided to leave that situation. They said enough. Jocelyn's father did not allow her mother to take her sons with her, so Jocelyn and her mom left alone, and she's grown up as an only child, living with her mother and some extended family. Her family now lives in an apartment that's owned by the church, which helps the church because the building is occupied and won't be robbed, and helps the family who can save the money that they would spend on rent. Jocelyn is 18 now, and she's very involved in the life of the church. She teaches Sunday school every week for the youngest children, and she pours into them. They create crafts and songs and skits and are so proud to share them with the rest of the church. Imagine with me how hard it would be to feel worthy, to feel loved, to feel like you are enough when you've grown up your whole life knowing your father rejected you in that way. Knowing he said in not so many words, "You're not good enough for me." At the end of the happening weekend, there's a time for the participants to share about their experience. And Jocelyn shared, with tears in her eyes, with her mother in the room, one simple sentence: I feel loved. That's the work that John and I do in Ecuador, and that's the work that y'all do here at St. John's too. And that's the work the Cuba team is about to go do this week in Cuba. We get the incredible blessing of reminding people that they are made in the image of God. This Lent, I'd like to challenge you and encourage you to keep that in mind. As you give something up each time you desire it, remind yourself that you have the power to say enough because you are made in the image of God. And if you're looking to take something on, make the people around you feel like they are enough. Remind them that they too are made in the image of God. Remind them, and while you're at it, remind yourself. You know when to say enough, friends, and you are enough. Amen.